Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to be talking about weightlifting belts. So there's usually two opinions when it comes to weightlifting belts. One crowd typically says that you should perform lifts without a belt, so doing them totally raw, because that means you're going to use more of your muscles and not rely on a belt. Therefore you're going to get stronger abdominals and a stronger lower back. Then there's the opposite crowd who says using a belt is going to force you to contract your muscles harder, therefore can make you stronger because you're contracting the muscles harder than what you could without the belt. So let's find out what the data says on this topic. What I've done, I went through the research, I read through all the papers, collected as many as I can that did a comparison of not using a belt compared to using a belt in predominantly squat and deadlifts. These studies they measured muscle activity, so they used EMG. If you're not too sure what that is, they get electrodes, put it on the muscles, and it can give a signal of the amount of electrical conductivity within the muscle, which may correlate to force production in that muscle. There are some issues with it, but it can give a good idea of how much those muscles are working. So let's go through all of these studies. So the first one, they did a 30% 1RM deadlift. They put the EMG, so they put the electrodes on the iliac crest, so that's kind of like in your pelvis down here, so it's kind of hard to say what muscle they were measuring directly, but from what they showed, that the belt increased EMG activity of the abdominal muscle. So for this one, they said increased abdominal activity using the belt. Next one, they did a 90% 1RM squat. In this, they found the belt decreased EMG of the rectus abdominis, so the abs at the front here, like your six-pack. Decreased activity of those, decreased activity of your external oblique. They saw decreased activity of the erector spine, so this kind of like lower back area. But they found that people, when they were using the belt, that increased the barbell velocity, so they could perform a 90% 1RM squat much or a little bit faster when they were wearing a belt. So decreased muscle activity with the belt, but greater barbell velocity. In this next study, they did an 8RM squat. These people were pretty heavy. They could do on average 125 kilo squat, which was about 1.6 times their body weight for 8 reps. So they were quite trained. In the external oblique, no difference between using a belt and not using a belt. No difference in their erector spine muscles. For the vastus lateralis, so one of the quadricep muscles, for some individuals, they got greater activity using the belt, but others saw no difference in that muscle. The ones who got great activity in the vastus lateralis, that might potentially show that they used a different movement pattern. So they used more of their quadriceps to perform the movement. The biceps femoris, so the hamstring, individuals got greater EMG activity when they used the belt. And again, they saw greater barbell velocity, so they could squat quicker when they were using the belt. So summary of that, no difference in muscle activity of the trunk muscles, however, greater barbell velocity when using the belt. Next study, they did a sumo and conventional deadlift with and without a belt. They did a 12 RM. However, they only performed four repetitions with a 12 RM load, so it was a pretty easy lift. They saw that when using the belt, there was greater rectus abdominal activity, and when using the belt, there was less external oblique activity when using the belt. So they saw, again, increased rectus abdominis activity with the belt, decreased external oblique activity with the belt. So one muscle was up, one muscle was down. This next one, they did an isometric type deadlift. So they were kind of using this machine. It's kind of like an assisted deadlift machine, basically. They found that when using the belt, no difference in the rectus spine activity. Rectus abdominals increased with the belt. External oblique, no difference with the belt. So just with the belt, just greater EMG activation using the belt, but no difference in the spine or the spine muscles or the oblique using the belt. Next one, again, it was a machine. It was a squat lift machine. It kind of looked like an assisted deadlift, basically. Again, like a deadlift assistance type machine. Very low loads. So for women, they were only lifting 13.6 kilos, and for men, they were using 22.7 kilos. So 14 women showed decreased EMG activity of the external oblique when using the belt. However, 5 of the men showed increased EMG of the external oblique using the belt, and then 1 man showed no change in external oblique activity using the belt. So there was mostly a decrease in the oblique muscle when using a belt. Second last one, subjects performed a 90% 1RM squat. The mean load, I spelled mean wrong. The mean load that they used was 156 kilo, 1.8 times body weight. Pretty strong squat. So for the quadricep, vastus lateralis, the hamstring, adductor magnus, so that's kind of like your inner thigh, which is it's a hip extensor. The glutes, erector spinae, in all those muscles, there was no difference in EMG activity with or without the belt. However, they saw that lifting velocity in the squat increased by 7.7% when using a belt. So for muscle activity, no difference using the belt, however, greater barbell velocity. And for the last one, they did 6 reps on a high bar squat using 60% of their 1RM. So for the erector spinae, they measured around the lumbar of the L3, L5 area. They saw there was a 23% increase in mean muscle activity when using the belt. However, a little bit higher up in the thoracic region of the T5 and T7 vertebrae. Around that area, the muscles, there was no difference in muscle activity. So we saw increased activity of the lumbar muscles or muscles around that area with the belt. However, no difference in the muscles around the thoracic area. So, summarizing all of this research, we can kind of see some mixed results. Some increased EMG activity with the belt, some decreases with the belt, and some is no different. So really, it's kind of inconclusive if the muscle reduces muscle activity or if it increases muscle activity. So I guess some questions we can ask and we can get from this: will using a belt make your core weaker? Again, because of the inconclusive results, probably not. It's probably not going to make you weaker. And when we saw the decreases, when I was looking at that study, the decreases on average, the muscle activity was like somewhere around 20-ish, 25% on average. So it's not like that your muscles of the trunk in those ones that they showed the decreased activity, it's not like the muscles were totally switched off and it was totally relying on the belt. Of course, your muscles still have to work, so it's probably not going to make you weaker. If you are worried that using the belt is making you weaker, then perform some direct abdominal movements, which I would suggest to do anyway. Planks, hanging leg raises, ab roller. If you want to do some lower back stuff, back extensions, if you're worried that you are not getting fully working those muscles using the belt. Will using a belt make your core stronger? Directly, so it doesn't seem that using a belt forces you to contract the muscles any harder. So directly, probably not. Indirectly, maybe it might make your muscles stronger. And why I say this, so just going to this next, I'll just jump ahead. We saw that in 3 of the squat studies, there was increased barbell velocity at the same given load when using a belt. So if you were lifting the same load at a faster velocity, that would mean that the RPE is easier. Meaning if they went to total failure, if they did like maximum repetitions, they'd probably squeeze out a few more reps because of the faster barbell velocity when using a belt. Also, if they're doing the same given load at a faster barbell velocity, that might mean that they can do a slightly greater 1 RM if they're using a belt. Muscle activity goes up according to the greater load, and also if you're lifting a greater load, then you are likely getting stronger in those muscles. So that's what I meant by indirectly. Using a belt might make your trunk muscles stronger because it might allow you to lift heavier loads or get in more training volume, which may lead to increased strength or muscle hypertrophy of your trunk area. And just with this core weaker or core stronger, all of this research that I went over, these were all short-term studies. So at the time I'm taking this video, I'm not aware that there's any kind of long-term training studies where they do like a 12-week study with or without a belt, and then they show the changes in strength or muscle hypertrophy over a long term. So again, I'm not aware of any studies that have come out. So again, this is just from acute data. Is wearing a belt giving you an advantage? I just touched on that the greater barbell velocity might allow you to perform more repetitions or use a greater load. Some people, even for myself, I feel safer when I'm using a belt. It's a bit of a placebo effect. I just feel more comfortable when I use a belt, and a lot of other people feel similar. So if you feel safer when you're using a belt, then you will likely have increased confidence when you're performing a movement. Therefore, that can increase your performance when you're performing the movement. Can a beginner use a belt? I don't see why not. From that research, it doesn't really sound like that it's going to make you weaker if you are using a belt. It doesn't seem like you're going to get stronger if you're not using a belt. I don't see why you couldn't use it for a beginner to teach them on how to properly brace. I've had a lot of newbies who don't know how to breathe in their belly, like breathe and brace. For people who are watching this video and who have used a belt, you've probably found that when you're using that belt, you got that kind of external cue to push your stomach against, and it gives you that feeling of bracing your midsection. So for beginners, you could potentially use the belt to give them that cue to teach them what it feels like to feel braced. So yes, a beginner can use a belt. Who shouldn't use a belt? The only thing I can think of, if you're doing a sport-specific movement which requires you to not use a belt, then maybe you have to get good at that movement at not using a belt. The only really sport-specific movements that I can think that are going to be replicated in the gym that you're going to be using a belt, like the squats or lifting something from the ground, maybe in some sort of strongman events, using a belt might get in the way. I'm not a strong man myself. I've never competed or doing any of the exercises. I'm just going from what I've watched. When they pick up those stones from the floor, I don't know, can't remember off memory if they use a belt or not. The belt might get in the way, so maybe you might have to get good at lifting at something off the floor without a belt. There might be other strongman events that getting the belt, using a belt gets in the way, so you might have to practice being able to brace without using a belt. And also, there might be some people that just find a belt totally uncomfortable. Maybe their body shape, they just find that every time they use the belt, they just don't like it. So then those people, maybe you shouldn't use the belt, or maybe you should try different belts to find what is comfortable for them. But if they find that every belt they wear just is not comfortable, then maybe those people shouldn't wear a belt. And the last one, should you practice some lifts without a belt? For example, your warm-ups. I think it'll be a good idea just for like real life scenarios. Like, think if you're going to lift something heavy, if you're going to lift the shopping, a can, 24 pack of Pepsi, you're going to help someone move, you're moving furniture. It's not usually that like, oh hey, let me just get my weightlifting belt to help me brace against and to, you know, lift it up. You're not going to wear your weightlifting belt at Coles taking your shopping up the driveway. So maybe in real life scenarios, it might be good to practice some lifts of being able to brace without needing that external cue of the belt. But I would probably just do that in a few of my warm-ups when you start getting to those heavier lifts, because we saw that barbell velocity was greater when you were using a belt, meaning that's probably going to improve your performance. When you're getting to those heavier loads and you're getting to your work sets, you probably should use a weightlifting belt to maximize your performance. So that is everything I had to talk about weightlifting belts. Hopefully this was helpful. And that's it. That's all I can think of. Alright, that's enough from me for today.